The defense of reproductive rights remains a potent electoral issue more than 2 years after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. In the years since, proponents of abortion rights who've long understood the popularity and political power of protecting women's bodily autonomy have adopted a new approach. They've put the question of abortion rights directly to the people, and so far, it's resulted in great success. Since the fall of 2022, abortion-related referenda have appeared on the ballot in 6 states, and in all 6 instances, voters chose to protect abortion rights. In 2 of those states, Kansas and Kentucky, voters rejected proposals that would have further curtailed a woman's right to decide what to do with her body. Meanwhile, people in California, Michigan, Ohio, and Vermont voted to amend their constitutions to explicitly assert that the people in those states have a right to an abortion. Now, this year, 10 more states are hoping to follow that lead. Abortion-related referenda will appear on the ballot this November in Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New York, and South Dakota. This will be a big test for the reproductive rights movement that could reveal the limits or the lack thereof of this political strategy. Colorado, Maryland, and New York have a history of protecting reproductive rights, so passage appears likeliest in those states. But each state presents its own unique challenge. Some of those challenges are baked into those states' normal legal procedures. For instance, in Florida, amending the Constitution requires passage by 60% of voters, which is a higher threshold than the 55% required in Colorado and the simple majority needed in all the other states on this list. Meanwhile, enshrining abortion rights into Nevada's Constitution is still years away, even if its referendum passes this year. The state requires any amendment to its Constitution to pass twice in 2 successive general elections, which means that the ballot measure in Nevada must pass this year and then again in 2026 before it can be adopted. Additionally, opponents of abortion rights have been working overtime to either prevent or undermine these efforts in multiple states. Last month, Arizona Abortion Access for All, which is a pro-reproductive rights group, submitted more than 823,000 signatures in order to get its initiative on the ballot, which was more than twice as many signatures than needed, which is an early sign of the wide public support for that measure. But 2 weeks ago, the state Supreme Court in Arizona ruled that voter pamphlets can refer to an embryo or a fetus as, quote, an unborn human being, which is deliberately misleading language which was drafted up by Republican lawmakers in order to skew the vote. Something similar is happening in Missouri, where there are multiple outstanding lawsuits over its ballot measure that needs to be resolved within the next 10 days. A pro-abortion rights group in Missouri is also suing over misleading language about the initiative drafted by the Republican Secretary of State. Additionally, an anti-abortion coalition filed a separate lawsuit arguing that the proposal is overly broad and should not appear on the ballot. Things are a bit more nuanced in Montana, where abortion is currently still legal, but only because of a legal precedent set by the state Supreme Court in 1999. Some of the state's executives and lawmakers have a history of hostility toward reproductive rights. Earlier this year, the Republican Attorney General in Montana attempted to block the measure from appearing on the ballot before the state Supreme Court eventually overruled him. That's why Montana's referendum, which seeks to make the right to an abortion explicit in its constitution, is necessary to ensure that abortion rights in that state are protected. Meanwhile, the situation is more fraught in Nebraska, where opponents have adopted an even more aggressive strategy. This November, 2 abortion-related measures are going to be on Nebraska's ballot. One measure, called the Protect the Right to Abortion, will codify into the Constitution the right to an abortion before fetal viability. The second measure, called Protect Women and Children, was proposed by abortion opponents, and it seeks to enshrine abortion restrictions in the Constitution. That measure, if passed, would amend Nebraska's Constitution to ban abortions in the 2nd and 3rd trimesters. In the case that both of these measures receive a simple majority, the one that receives the most votes will be formally adopted. And there is one outlier on this list of 10, South Dakota, where abortion isn't just banned with no exceptions for rape or incest. Abortion is a crime. South Dakota's referendum doesn't go as far as the referenda in other states. It does seek to legalize abortion during the first trimester and only allow it in the second trimester if the woman's health is in danger. Unlike Nebraska, there's no competing initiative that gives voters the option to fully enshrine abortion into the Constitution. But it will nonetheless restore some level of abortion access in a state that has made it entirely impossible to receive that care. Abortion has been a pivotal factor in elections in the last couple of years, and this year will be the first time the country will hold a presidential election since Roe fell. With so many abortion initiatives on the ballot this year, a lot of attention is going to be paid to how the politics of reproductive rights could affect the presidential race and where it goes from here.